All right. So I'm going to be talking about recreational and commercial harvest here. Commercial harvest is something we haven't really talked about today, but in Missouri we do have a commercial harvest of catfish. So catfish as a group are important both recreationally and commercially. Catfish rank third in popularity among anglers and represent about 21% of our total harvest on the Mississippi River. From angler surveys, we found that most catfish anglers in the state of Missouri are generally harvest oriented. They're interested in number, generally more than size. And so in Missouri, management goals for catfish tend to be around size, structure, and yield. Both are management goals. The fishing regulations we currently have are statewide fishing regulations in Missouri. On the Missouri River, commercial harvest of catfish was closed in 1992 to reallocate that harvest to recreational anglers. And right now there's a 5 daily bag limit of flathead catfish with no length limit, and a daily bag limit of 5 blue catfish per day with no length limit. Mississippi River, there still is commercial harvest of catfish. For commercial fishermen, there's no daily bag limit, but there is a 15-inch minimum length limit for both blue catfish and flathead catfish. Recreational regulations on the Mississippi River, you can keep 10 flathead catfish per day, no length limit, and 20 blue catfish and channel catfish in the aggregate per day with no length limit. Should mention real quick on the Missouri River, anglers are restricted to 33 hooks. You can have 3 unlabeled hooks and up to 33 hooks total. The rest beyond 3 have to be labeled, such as trot lines, bank poles, or if you put a label on all of your rods, you could fish with 33 rods. So flathead catfish and blue catfish, may be susceptible to overharvest given some of the population characteristics, such as they're long-lived. They commonly exceed 20 years of age in Missouri, and relative to other species, these catfish species are relatively slow-growing. We commonly see them growing about 2 inches a year on the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, though. In the first year, they reach about 7 to 8 inches and then grow 2 inches after that. And again, relative to other species, these catfish are less fecund, except larger individuals can be, especially large blue catfish, can be very fecund. So again, there's could be concerns of high harvest for large individuals. And everybody is aware there's some recent changes in angler demographics. Trophy catfish angling is becoming more popular. It's also an angler group that's vocal and we hear a lot from. And pay lakes have increased in popularity, though not in Missouri. They're just east of Missouri, and a lot of these pay lakes purchase large live catfish from commercial fishermen for stocking in those pay lakes. And some regulations that have been put in place on the Ohio River could potentially shift some targeted commercial harvest onto the Mississippi. So these were some concerns that that caused MDC to initiate an assessment of our blue catfish and flathead catfish populations in our large rivers, and to do a complete assessment of population characteristics. This study is just a component of that larger project. In this study, this is our exploitation estimates, and because of those concerns with possible high harvest of large individuals, we were interested in estimating exploitation across size groups. So looking at size selective harvest. We had 4 study reaches on the Mississippi River and 4 study reaches on the Missouri River. Each reach was 20 river miles in length, which is slightly larger than the median dispersal distance from some previous telemetry studies. And we used GRIT's design, which generalized random tessellation stratified design that randomly selects your reaches, but avoids any clustering. It spreads them out. And again, we had 4 reaches on the Mississippi and 4 on the Missouri. Most of our fish that we tagged were collected using pulse DC electrofishing, using 15 hertz and 30% duty cycle. This was a standardized sampling technique for collecting size structure data, and during that sampling we also were tagging fish. We did some additional sampling using gill nets, trot lines, and hoop nets to get larger fish just for the tagging exploitation study. So for the tagging study, we tagged fish with Carlin dangler tags, which the tag is you use hypodermic needles, go through the dorsal of the fish and twist the wires on both sides. As long as you get the wires around the tergiophores, tag retention is pretty high. We used the high reward tagging method, so to estimate non-reporting of tags. We had $25 reward value was our standard tag, and then we had $150 reward value for our high reward. Tags were split up between 2-inch size groups, starting at 15 inches, which again is the minimum length limit of harvest on the commercial harvest on the Mississippi River. And previous study by Vince Travnicek showed that 15 inches is an implicit length limit for angler harvest on the Missouri River. So starting at 15 inches, we targeted to tag 11 fish in each 2-inch length interval in each site each year. And up until 35 inches, then we combined 35 to 40 inches as a size group, and then 40 inches plus as the last size group. And within each size 2-inch size group, we had random order of our reward value, where 25% of the tags were the high reward, the $150. Except the 2 largest size groups had 50% of the tags were the $150 value. We had the target of tagging 132 fish per site per year, which came out to be just over 2,000 fish per species total. So just over 1,000 for each species on each river. We estimated non-reporting just as the proportion of the $25 tags reported over the proportion of high reward tags reported. Assuming that the high reward tags generated maximum return rate. which, was hopefully 100%. Exploitation then we estimated for each of those size groups. We corrected for non-reporting, and we also corrected for tag loss, which from a previous study was estimated to be 1.1%. And then the number of tags at large were corrected for tags that were caught and released, but the fish was caught and released, but the tag was kept. So, Missouri River, we were able to tag 850 flathead catfish, and as of January 1st, 158 of those tags had been reported. The reporting rate was estimated at 65% then that's the reporting rate for the $25 tags on the Missouri River. And that reporting rate varied from 43% to 99% by river reach. Our exploitation was estimated just the first year post-tagging, so it's on an annual basis. There were 71 flathead catfish harvested within 1 year post-tagging. 25 were caught and released. And across our size groups, there was no statistical difference in exploitation. So to note though that there was zero harvest of flathead catfish from 15 to 17 inches. So and then across all the other size groups, our average exploitation was about 14.2%. On the Mississippi River, we were able to tag 836 flathead catfish, of which 123 have been reported, and our reporting rate estimate is 62% overall on the Mississippi River, and that varied from 46% to 78%. Exploitation by size, we had 61 flathead catfish harvested within 1 year following tagging, 11 caught and released. And again, across our size groups, there was no difference in exploitation. So our overall estimate is again 14.2% annual exploitation. So the commercial fishermen, though, did not harvest any fish under 23 inches. So commercial fishermen tended to harvest larger fish than the recreational anglers did. And just comparing the Missouri River and Mississippi River, they were generally pretty similar in exploitation across size. Okay, blue catfish on the Missouri River, we tagged 915, and as of January 1st, there were 187 reported by anglers. We had an estimated reporting rate of 60% overall, and that ranged from 40% to 95% across our reaches. For blue catfish on the Missouri River, there was a strong size selective harvest trend, which generally increased with increased fish length until about 33 inches. But there was a statistical difference. There were three groupings. The smallest size groups from 15 to 23 inches, and then the largest size group, the 40 plus inches, averaged exploitation of 3.8%. The next cluster was the size groups 23 to 29 inches, and then that 35 to 40 inch size group. And exploitation of those fish averaged 12%. And then the mid-size fish had the highest exploitation of 31%. On the Mississippi River, 769 blue catfish were tagged. 140 have been reported, and we had a reporting rate of 82% for our standard tags. And that was pretty similar between recreational and commercial fishers. Our reporting rate by reach varied from 66 to 110%, which so that having a reporting rate over 100% just suggests that your standard tags and your high reward tags were reported at equal rates. So that 110% was decreased to 100%, just so we assumed that we got maximum reporting rates for our $25 tags. Exploitation by size, again, was statistically different on the Mississippi River, but a little different than what we saw on the Missouri River. So most sizes, all except the 25 to 29 inch fish and the 35 to 40 inch fish, all had relatively low exploitation, averaging 8%. And then those other size groups had an average exploitation of 24.9%. Again, comparing the Missouri River and Mississippi River, the Mississippi River was generally higher than the Missouri, slightly higher than the Missouri River, except those three size groups that had highest exploitation on the Missouri River had low exploitation on the Mississippi River. So to recap our flathead catfish harvest, it was pretty uniform across size groups. We didn't see any statistical differences. It's comparable to what's been estimated for other studies, where our exploitation by reach ranged from 10 to 21%. Blue catfish, we did see strong size selective harvest. Kind of those mid-sized individuals were more vulnerable to harvest on the Missouri River, where the highest exploitation were those size groups, 25 to 40 inch fish. And that differed though between the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, and there's some concerns that the $150 tags may not have been fully reported on the Mississippi River. And so those concerns, when you don't have good reporting rates for your high reward tags, could lead to underestimates of exploitation. That the $150 reward should have generated maximum reporting rate based on some studies on duck bands, and adjusted for inflation. We should have got close to 100% reporting rate with $150. But it just could have been that there may have not been any dollar amount that would have encouraged those tags to be reported if angler or fisherman distrust was high enough. There is some commercial harvest creel data that suggest fish 25 inches, they're very common in commercial harvest creel data. They're harvested in relatively high frequencies, so again, there's probably some non-reporting of the $150 tags occurring on the Mississippi River. But this data is to aim to help with age-structured population modeling, and generally what we see is overexploitation is not likely occurring on the Missouri or Mississippi rivers. High harvest of those large individuals was not observed in this study, but managers may be able to, based on their management goals, they may find that protecting some vulnerable size classes could help with improving size structure or reaching their management objectives. Anyways, that's it if there's any questions.
All right, thanks, Scott.